Thank you, Madam Speaker. And again, I reiterate my congratulations and welcome to everybody who's travelled obviously a long distance from either the South Coast, and I met some of my friends from Manyana also who are here. Who else is from Manyana, just out of interest? Yeah. Oh, Peter, it's just you. Okay. I was going to mention Manyana, but I'll still mention it because it's sort of related to this. But I do want to congratulate everybody, in particular Tekiza Frank, and I went out to see Tekiza, but of course she was doing a media interview. Is Tekiza back? No. There she is. I want to congratulate her because she has communicated with my office on several occasions. She actually wanted to know who was speaking today, and I'm sorry, Tekiza, I couldn't tell you that because we really didn't know until this morning who the other speakers would be. It's like that with petitions. And this was deferred, as you know, Madam Speaker, a couple of times, and we have it back on today. So congratulations, everybody, for coming along. I want to read the text of the petition, I think, to put on the record because it's important to know what the petitioners are asking this government to do. So it goes to the effect, words to the effect of this. To the Speaker and members of the Legislative Assembly, public native forest logging is pushing iconic species like the koala, swift parrot and greater glider towards extinction. The 2019-2020 black summer bushfires burned over 5 million hectares of forest and have left them more vulnerable to the impacts of logging. The Natural Resources Commission, NRC, and the Environmental Protection Agency have recommended that in bushfire-affected areas, logging should cease entirely or face tighter restrictions. As current logging practices may cause irreversible damage to ecosystems and wildlife. Logging of public native forests is taxpayer subsidised. Forestry Corporation's Hardwood Division has been operating at a significant loss for the past decade. In 2021, it ran at a loss of $20 million, with predictions that it will face losses of $15 million until 2024. Reports also show our state forests can generate far more income through their protection than from logging, through recreation, tourism and carbon abatement. The Western Australian and Victorian governments have already committed to ending this industry and have developed transition plans to support affected workers and businesses. The petitioners asked the Legislative Assembly to 1. Develop a plan to transition the native forestry industry to 100% sustainable plantations by 2024. In the interim, place a moratorium on public native forest logging until the regulatory framework reflects the recommendation of the leaked NRC report. 3. Immediately protect high conservation forests through gazettal in the National Park Estate. 4. Ban use of native forest materials as biomass fuel. Now, this particular petition, Madam Speaker, received well over 20,000 signatures. It was 21,046 signatures. So it is a message. It is a message here to the government. It is a message to all of us that we in the South Coast, we in our region, were so severely affected by bushfires, unlike members opposite who were not affected in the same way as we were. Where our bushlands, whether it was forestry, whether it was National Party, whatever it was, there were huge areas of... Well, you may not have been in the middle of bushfires, Member for Newtown, if you want to interject.
Order.
We lost hundreds and hundreds of homes, Member for Newtown. We lost lives. And so that was the impact on the South Coast and regions in the South Coast region. So I'm saying that the impact on us was significant and extremely serious. That's where the passion for this petition has come. That's where the passion for residents, as I referred to Peter from Manyana, has come, who is now, we are all concerned about what's going to happen to an area of land and bushland in Manyana which was not burnt, and for which we asked the Minister for the Environment to come down a couple of weeks ago. He did. He's now going to, good news, reopen negotiations with Council, and we will have an offer on the table to buy that land. If it's the last thing I do before I retire, we want to retain that bushland for Manyana, because if you've ever been to Manyana or Bendalong, you will see how precious it is. As with all of the bushland, if you've ever heard me talk in this parliament about our bushland and our beautiful natural areas, you will know how I feel about it. But of course, there's always another side. There's always another side to the argument, and I know the Minister will outline that, to say, well, there are actions that the government, to be fair, have taken in response to the 2019-2020 bushfires. And the Minister will no doubt outline what the government has done, because we can't just ignore the bushfires that ravage those areas. And he will tell you about accelerated replanting programs which are occurring. including 2 reduction nurseries planting approximately 16 million softwood and hardwood plantation seedlings. So those kind of actions are ongoing. I do commend the petition to the House. I do, again, congratulate all those who worked so hard to bring this petition to this stage. It's not easy. And thank all members who are going to stay back this afternoon and speak on the petition.
The question is that the House take note of the petition. I call the member for Ballina.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the Greens, and I also have my colleagues, a member for Newtown, member for Balmain here in the chamber, I rise to speak on the petition to end logging in our public native forests and acknowledge that this petition was tabled by the member, by Ms Shelley Hancock, and a huge shout out to Mr Kisa Frank, who initiated the petition and got such a tremendous response. Getting over 20,000 signatures on a petition is an incredible effort. And also to 2 people in particular who reached out to my office, Janice Haviland and Martin Derby. And we've got Sean O'Shaughnessy from North East Forest Alliance in the gallery today, who've done so much incredible work on this. And of course, all of the environmental groups in New South Wales who have been arguing for many years that logging in native forests is a travesty and must be phased out. And it was so great to meet many of you outside before. Thank you for coming today. Madam Speaker, public native forest logging is pushing iconic species towards extinction, and what the petitioners are calling for could assist in preventing this from happening in a really obvious way. Transitioning the native forestry industry to 100% sustainable plantations by 2024, placing moratoriums on public native forest logging until a regulatory framework is developed, and protecting high conservation value forests through gazettal in the national parks estate, and banning the use of native forest materials as biomass fuel, I would have thought, and we think, is the absolute minimum next steps. Madam Speaker, I want to actually focus on the biomass aspect of this petition. The Australian Greens were able to secure a commitment from the federal ALP to look into removing a coalition loophole from the Renewable Energy Act, which allows the destruction and burning of native forests to be classified as renewable energy, to displace solar and wind power. I'm not making this up, that is the loophole that exists. Right now, and very proud of NEFA and other NGOs' campaigns around this, on the 30th of September, the federal government's native forest biomass in the renewable energy target consultation paper was released, and public submissions are open until 21st of October. Please tell Labor that this loophole is a crime against humanity. The idea that you can actually burn forests, native forests, and turn them into coal mines and then say and receive carbon credits for doing so is an absolutely insanity.
Order.
There is a high... So we hear from those opposite that there's a high level of community interest and a range of views regarding the issues. Well, we disagree. The public forest estate provides critical human life-supporting biodiversity maintenance and economy-sustaining services to the people of New South Wales through tourism and through engaging with the beautiful, through our beautiful native forests. These underpin and are critical to our entire economy and the welfare and well-being of the entire state. So even if we don't want to talk about climate change, even if we don't want to talk about the appalling business case that has failed in forestry, in logging in native forests, and the extraordinary impacts on vulnerable species over a long period of time, and particularly since the Black Summer bushfires, even if we didn't want to talk about any of that, we would still be arguing that these native forest estates are the property of citizens in this state to enjoy. They are not a business model to cut down trees. With the climate crisis escalating, there's an urgent need to protect and enhance these critical functions of our native forest estates. Madam Speaker, industrial logging of the public forest estate harms all 7 million citizens of New South Wales. The assertion that the New South Wales Government continues to support the sustainable management of our forests in New South Wales is simply not true. The fires of Black Spring and Summer have caused significant and irreversible harm to the public forest estate. 5 million hectares in New South Wales burnt, including more than 890,000 hectares of native state forests. This is over 40% of the coastal and tablelands native state forests in New South Wales. The imperative is there that we must save it. Madam Speaker, the Greens support the move to sustainable plantation model as long as there is the resourcing and the planning. Certainly in my electorate we've seen disasters where you know, lots of money was invested and they were simply not maintained. And we know that in landscapes such as entire landscapes within the public native forest estate surrounding Coffs Harbour, for example, support globally significant conservation values and have been industrially logged since the Black Spring and Black Summer, and that is an absolute crime. Similarly in the Dorrigo Plateau. So, Madam Speaker, we absolutely support this petition, and we want to thank and congratulate all of those environmentalists and citizens of this state that realise that this is the end, and we must see the end of logging in our native forests.
Thank the member for Ballina. The question is that the House take note of the petition, and I call the member for Clarence.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise to speak in response to the petition that was tabled by the member for South Coast, and of course I do acknowledge the petitioners or the gallery for their efforts in obtaining 20,000 signatures, because it is an effort, and I know that, and I understand why you're here, but I'm really disappointed with that contribution by the member for Ballina, because it is misleading, and that's one of the problems with when we talk about native forestry in this country, in this state in particular, is that a lot of the proposals that have been raised are based on a range of misconceptions, misinformation and unfounded beliefs. And really, when it comes to look at which side of the House manages forests better, this side does manage forests better. And that was shown when Bob Carr declared state forests national parks back in the 80s, because they were managed so well by forestry, by Forest Corp that it is now. They are managed well. It's like your garden. You can't let your garden just overgrow with weeds. You have to manage it, and that's exactly what this
Order.
Well, unfortunately, and that's what the problem is. We let our national parks overgrow, and when the bushfires came through, 7.2 million hectares of national park killed 5 billion native species. That's what a national park does when you don't have the resources to manage it. But when you have because it's going to come out of health or education. No, but it can't come out of health or education. But the forests are managed. They're managed in a responsible way, and we see that. Do we want to actually go out to Borneo and to get native timbers from Borneo and attack the
Order. I'll ask the member for Clarence to direct his comments through the chair.
Yeah, we have plantation timbers, we do. We also have native forests, and the reason that the forests were created in the first instance was to provide a resource for the inhabitants to build their houses from, to construct their city. This place here is constructed from timber from our forests. That was the whole purpose of it, and that's still the purpose of it, because if we want affordable housing, where is the construction material going to come from? Where's it going to come from? You know, we want you on this side of the House talk about affordable housing, but how are you going to provide it if you don't actually go in and cut down a tree to provide it? You know,
Order.
Forest Corp plants 4 million seedlings every year to replace the ones it cuts. Now, if that's not carbon sequestration, what is? What is? You know, it's a joke. It's a joke when you don't look at the evidence and look at the facts. Yeah, look at the evidence.
Order.
5 billion native species killed through a hot fire because those national parks didn't have the resources to be managed effectively.
Order.
Yes, so we'll take them from education and take
Member
them from
for
health.
Balmain.
Is that what you're saying? But that's what you're saying. No, you're saying...
Member for Clarence, direct your comments through the chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, I will. And the fact of the matter is that the government's resources are finite. They're not unlimited. We don't have... We just can't go off the credit card and spend wherever we want to. And the state forests are managed. They're managed effectively, and they do produce revenue that goes back into managing those forests, revenue that looks after feral animals, noxious weeds. Where's that revenue going to come from? Yeah. Do our national parks make a profit? No, they don't. Of course they don't.
Order.
Native forestry is a heavily regulated to ensure that there's long-term ecological sustainability, and robust science is consistently demonstrating that those regulations are effective. And the proposal to create public native forests would have substantial negative impacts on the New South Wales economy and the state's finances. And we've got to remember that forestry sector is worth around $2.8 billion, thank you. It directly supports almost 20,000 jobs, 40% of them in regional New South Wales. So I call on you, on the Labor Party and those opposite, to stop villainising the timber industry and support the productive and sustainable approach the Coalition Government has put in place to manage this incredible resource. And it is an incredible resource, and it's been used as a building material since Jesus was a boy. And we know why, because it is sustainable and because it is a terrific product. And so why do we villainise it? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The question is that the House take note of the petition. I call the member for Lismore.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I
Order.
wanted to speak to this particular petition that has some 21,000 signatures, and I take umbrage with what the member for Clarence said, that I'm not someone who's vilifying the industry, but I want to be part of the debate because it's a debate that's gone on for some 40 years that I've been involved in my area, and it's been so divided so many times, and we have to finish this debate in some way that we get a sustainable industry. And they're the objectives that most people are going for, and they're the objectives of the people who signed this petition. Somehow we've got to get there. I understand it's important. So many in my area, in the Lismore electorate, and beyond that, are passionate about this issue. I have huge environmental movements. There's NEFA, who are here today, the Nature Conservation Council were here this week. Local constituents have written to me in support of the petition, and I've also had some of my local forestry workers and the unions and some of my timber industry also talk to me about the petition and what's before us. And I understand the passion, the emotion in it. As I said, I've lived it for a long time, and my area, and I'd say the South Coast, by listening to the member for the South Coast and what I've seen in this debate, you're at the vortex of it. But at the heart of it is our desire to have our forests protected from fire, flood, pestilence, habitats for animals and rare plants, weed and predator free or minimal, and that's what we all want. And we want a sustainable logging industry wherever it takes place. I have read recently that both Western Australia under Premier McGowan, and I'd hardly call him a radical premier of any kind, is moving to end native forestry logging. And I note Victoria are doing the same, and a more progressive premier in Victoria, so with Premier Andrews. But these desires or objectives speak to management, and that's been the problem for so many years that I've seen. But we also know before European colonisation that the forests, and they're extensive, they were managed, but of course the Indigenous nations also practice cultural burning, which thank goodness so many are embracing now because we see the value in it. But one of the things that the member for the South Coast said, and it really struck with me, was that this petition was a message to government. It was a message to all of us that we had to take note and take heed, and we certainly do. But I also want to draw attention in this place to the inquiry that was done in the other place, in the Legislative Council, the inquiry into the long-term sustainability and future of the timber and forest products industry. And I only read that just recently, Madam Deputy Speaker, and when I looked at the members who were on there, I noticed that there were no Greens on that inquiry. I'm not sure why. It was chaired by the Shooters, Farmers and Fishers. And when I looked at their findings and their recommendations, it is really, really telling about the state of the industry and what's going on under Forestry Corporation. There were all up 11 findings, and findings 2, 3 and 5 I draw our attention to. It said in the last decade there's been no increase in additional hardwood and softwood timber plantations. It said the lack of expansion of timber plantations by the New South Wales Government has significantly contributed to the current timber crisis, which has only been further exacerbated, we know, by recent events, including the 2019-20 bushfires, which we heard about from the member for the South Coast. Then the other finding, the reduction in harvestable areas of public native forests and failure to expand native hardwood plantations has resulted in the loss of wood supply, and it goes on with that. Then the recommendations. The New South Wales Government identify and implement as a priority a long-term funded strategy for the expansion of both softwood and hardwood timber plantations in New South Wales. We can all agree that has to happen, that the New South Wales Government establish further state-owned timber plantations, and that the New South Wales Government provide long-term support to workers in the timber and forest products industry transitioning away from native forestry to other parts of the sector with access to worker transition services, training and retraining support, relocation support and counselling. And that was from the other place, their inquiry. Thank you,
I thank the member for Lismore. The question is that the House take note of the petition. I call the member for Oxley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I note that state forests have planted 16 million hardwood trees this year. In plantations. I agree with a lot of the sentiments that have been put forward here today, and I particularly acknowledge the very rounded contribution by the member for Lismore in relation to the need for a hardwood industry. And I would argue, and do strongly argue, and I agree with the proposition put by the member for Ballina, we should only be doing this type of work in plantations. And we are. They're native forestry plantations that have been existing for, and we've been logging for 100 years or more. It is an industry that is sustainable and can be sustainable. The member for South Coast was quite correct in talking about the dreadful impacts the 1920 bushfires had on the north and the south. The most terrible impact was on the koalas in our national parks around Ebor. That is the concern, where we aren't, and there are finite resources. The member for Clarence is absolutely correct. And country people want to see our forests managed in a more holistic way, because we need our native hardwood. We need it for our floorboards. We need it for our verandas. We need it for our decking, because we don't want to go to Bunnings and buy it from Borneo, the Philippines or Indonesia, because we have the most strongest environmental considerations of any planet in the world when it comes to logging. And I do respect the passion, I do respect the effort that the members of your communities, Shelley Hancock, member for South Coast, have come here today with. But we do need to find a better balance in the conversation and the way we have that conversation, because, my goodness, we need that hardwood. We want our young people to be able to have affordable homes. We need the jobs to continue within our communities, because I go to my timber mills and I've got some of the most decent, hard-working and I might say less educated people working and having a job, and particularly from our Indigenous communities. And that is something I am proud of. I am also proud that Byron Shire Council has reached 100% renewables in their energy supply, and partly because of the Cape Byron energy plant near Byron Bay, which is using it's a biomass plant. And I do take exception with the member for Ballina saying we would go and put big trees and harvest forests to put trees in a biomass unit. That would be just economically stupid. It's illegal. And it's illegal. What you do is, if you have waste, you have bark, you have limbs that are no use to the industry, then the waste and the residue can help with the biomass to give us 100% renewable. This is the type of conversations we need to be having, because we need to support our timber industry in a sustainable way. Post the bushfires, the evidence around the koalas coming back from a very dreadful situation, the science around that is that they, after the fires, they went, once the trees were starting to grow again, they were absolutely gorging themselves on the new shoots. The new shoots, koalas habitat like new trees. So where you are going around and you are sustainably,
Order.
And I might just point out, timber harvesting.
Member for Oxley has the call.
Timber harvesting operations take place in only around 1% of state forests each year. which is around 0.1% of forested land in New South Wales. We are not out there clear felling. One of the saddest things that happened in this state was in 2006, when under Bob Carr, we turned the Pilliga State Forest into a protected national park. In that year, a bushfire came through and wiped out thousands of koalas. And we were told, no, it's not funny, Jamie, because that is exactly what happened. That is exactly what happened.
Member for Balmain, you're on a call.
Because we gave up our opportunity to better manage that, because we were told the tourists were going to go to the Pilliga. Well, the tourists don't go to the Pilliga, I can tell you. We destroyed a forestry industry, we destroyed the thinning out, we destroyed the ability to get rid of the weeds, and then in 2006 it all just went up in a big fire. And that is the other side of the conversation and the debate we must have in the most respectful way to support our communities and this country.
Thank the member for Oxley. Member for Sydney.
I seek leave to make a brief contribution.
The member for Sydney is seeking leave to make a contribution. Is leave granted? Order. Order.
I'm going to be speaking to the petition.
Order. Member for Sydney has the call.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I rise in support of the petition of over 20,000 New South Wales residents who are calling for an end to the deforestation of our native forests and a plan to transition the forestry industry to sustainable plantations by 2024 and protect forestry workers and communities. And I welcome everybody here into the gallery today and thank the member for the South Coast for her speech bringing this petition to the Parliament. As we know, Australia has a terrible history of biodiversity destruction, with the highest rates of species loss among developed countries. In New South Wales, 100 animals and plants have become extinct since European settlement, but the extinction process has not slowed, with mass deforestation and habitat destruction continuing, even following the Black Summer bushfires. The Black Summer bushfires burned through over 5 million hectares of land, 2 million hectares, or 41% of the national park estate, and 875,000 hectares, or 42% of state forest, killing over 1 billion animals and hundreds of billions of insects. Since then, a range of animal and plant species have been added to the already long threatened species list, including the koala and the greater glider. We face a massive extinction crisis unless we do things differently. The New South Wales State of the Environment 2021 report identified habitat destruction and native vegetation clearing as the biggest threats to biodiversity in this state. We are logging about 14,000 hectares of native forest every year, with impacts across a range of threatened species. Logging state forests is not sustainable. The New South Wales Environmental Protection Authority has concluded that Forestry Corporation New South Wales environmental controls are severely inadequate, and the forestry industry has failed to achieve a Forestry Stewardship Council certification for its timber. It also regularly breaches the protections that do exist, with 10 fines issued or proceedings commenced since the fires for breaches where protected giant trees, trees with hollows, or koala-fed trees were felled. A 2021 leaked Natural Resources Commission report recommended that logging cease in 6 different native forest regions in the state. Meanwhile, wood biomass emits up to 50% more carbon dioxide than coal when burnt. In our inquiry into sustainability of energy supply and resources, which I chaired, the Environmental and Planning Committee recommended a ban on the use of native forest timber for biomass electricity. There is more value in keeping our native forests intact. Bigger, older forests store more carbon and are more resilient to fires. A 2021 report by Frontier Economics found that if logging ceased in the southeast forest, over 20 million tonnes of carbon would be abated in just 20 years, with the economic value of the carbon credits worth some $61.2 million. Revenue from carbon credits reinvested in regions could create new employment opportunities, including in nature-based tourism. It is estimated the Great Koala National Park would create nearly 10,000 tourist jobs. We don't need to destroy our forests for timber. Over 90% of timber products used in New South Wales come from plantations. The hardwood plantation industry has potential to keep growing as demand increases. The softwood plantation timber industry already runs at a profit, with $47 million per year, and is expected to further expand. The speed at which this petition was able to achieve over 20,000 signatures demonstrates the widespread concern in the community about clearing our native forests. Polls have shown that the practice's unpopularity, and I personally receive regular emails from constituents and people across the state who oppose it. Victoria and WA have already committed to a transition from native forest logging to plantation timber. New South Wales can do the same, and we can ensure that affected communities have new and sustainable jobs into the future. I join the people of New South Wales in calling for an end to native forest logging and for the government to start working on a plan that will transition the industry to sustainable plantations by 2024, with support to ensure workers and communities have meaningful and sustainable jobs. I thank the member for the South Coast for presenting the petition to the Parliament.
Thank the member for Sydney. The question is that the House take note of the petition.
Madam Speaker.
I call the Minister for Agriculture and the Minister for Western New South Wales in response.
Thank you, and I thank the member for tabling this petition today. And I've listened with great interest to some of the things that have been said here today. I just want to clarify a few misconceptions at the start. First of all, logging does not occur in state forests. Selective harvesting is what occurs in state forests.
Order.
The EPA is the body that is in charge of activating all of the regulations around that, and they do that regularly. Biomass that's been spoken about is not the saw log part of a tree that is used for any biomass production. It is the roots, the bark, the other parts that aren't usable for anything apart from chipping or burning or pulping.
Or a bushfire.
It's about
Order.
turning that waste into energy rather than leaving it in a space that can add to a bushfire concern. That's the point of that. Now, as far as state forests, as mentioned by one of the former speakers, we're using a tiny percentage of state forests for harbour productivity, for harvesting for productivity for our communities. So we're talking about 1% of the state forest that's harvested, and that's about 0.1% of the broader forested landscape. It's a tiny amount, it is a managed amount, and it's not done in a way with disregard for the environment. That's the point. Now, I have said ever since I've been the Minister for this that I hold Forestry Corporation to the highest level of compliance. That is absolutely what we need to do. And I think we all agree on this side, there is no room for things to be done incorrectly. But to suggest that timber, forests and state forests don't work hand in hand and don't support communities is just incorrect. And a couple of other things worth mentioning is that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change recognises that managing forests for sustainable timber production is one of the best ways to mitigate climate change. Removing trees, allowing more canopy, sunshine through the canopy, growing new trees actually sequesters great amounts of carbon, and we have a fantastic renewable, organic, regenerative resource that we love as humans. Also, state forests do support things like tourism. Well, we're talking about native-based tourism. State forests already do that, and we're expanding the mountain biking, the horse riding, the picnicking, the walking trails, all managed because we have state forests that are managed to do that. Now, I'm interested to see what Labor actually does around forest as a policy matter, because we have complete support from a number of workers up and down the coast and inland who are saying they want support for native forestry. On this side of the House, we absolutely provide that support. It's worth $2.8 billion and thousands of jobs, and we have their back, but we do appreciate the petition.
Thank you.
Thank the Minister. The question is that the House take note of the petition. Are you rising, Member for Newtown? The member. Well, unfortunately, because the Minister has already responded. I'll seek the advice of the clerks.
It's too late to seek leave. It's Minister's
Well,
response.
no,
then
order.
it's the member
I'll
to
seek
wrap
advice
up.
from the clerks, but we have moved past the debate into the response.
It was really, really ridiculous what you said to me.
Member for Newtown, are you...
Member for Newtown wanted to clarify something that she said to me.
Member for Newtown, are you seeking leave to make... The member for Newtown is seeking leave to make a contribution. Is leave granted? No, she's seeking leave to make a contribution. Member for Newtown has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. I just wanted to briefly say and just put on the record the ongoing Green support for this petitioners, and thank you all for being here as part of this debate.
Order. Order. She's... Sorry, just stop the clock. The member for Newtown sought leave. That's what she asked me. Could you have... Well, I'm running the chamber here. She asked me to seek leave. I asked. She said she can. So, member for Newtown, you do have the call and you have the 5 minutes allocated.
Thank you, Speaker. As you all heard, the member for Ballina spoke on behalf of the Greens in relation to the petition, and I wanted to reiterate my support for her contribution and for your petition. I just wanted to clarify a couple of things as a member of a city electorate in Newtown. Quite often we get quite derogatory remarks from others on the other side of the chamber about the fact that we don't know or the impact of native logging of our native forests, or of bushfires, or of floods, or of other things that happen in regional areas don't have an impact on our communities. And I thought it's very important to say, as the member for Sydney alluded to, that our communities have such an incredible value of the incredible natural wonders and beauties of our state. And just because they live in the inner city is actually arguably even more of a desire and respect for wanting to go out into regional areas and appreciate our beautiful forests and our natural environment. And so I think it's really important to recognise that while I might be here representing the electorate of Newtown that sadly doesn't have any native forests in it, the community of Newtown is very much committed to ensuring that we stop the logging of our native forests, and a lot of our communities were directly impacted with families and friends and loved ones that they lost in the bushfires on the south coast and have been directly impacted as a result of the floods across the state. And so the idea that people in the city don't have a genuine personal impact and heartfelt connection to the bush, to the country, to native logging, to the native forests and the logging of those forests, but also are not directly impacted by the trauma created as a result of bushfires and floods in our state because they have family members, friends, loved ones, colleagues that live in those areas. I thought it was important to put on the record, and that is why I interjected when the member who brought this petition said that, because I know there are a lot of people in our electorate that were directly impacted as a result of the bushfires that happened on the south coast and the tragedies that occurred there.
Thank the member for Newtown. The question is the House take note of the petition. I call the member for the South Coast in reply.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I want to thank all speakers who've given some really interesting and different perspectives, and I think we're all entitled to have different views, and I think it's been done in a very respectful way. And certainly if the member for Newtown thought that I was making a derogatory remark about her, in a way, I guess I might have been, and she might have taken it personally, because I guess people in Newtown weren't ravaged by bushfires. They didn't lose their homes. There weren't 300 homes lost. There weren't close friends of yours lost who lost their lives in the bushfires of the South Coast.
Order.
My point is,
Order.
my point is that the South Coast is a very special place, and it needs to be treated carefully and with respect, because we have been through such trauma. We have all experienced that trauma. But on the same, all right, if you want to continue to interject, that's just what you do.
No,
that's
order.
what you do. That's just what you do.
Order. Member for Balmain.
Can we just restrict it to what we're talking about? I just want to give another perspective again to what we've already been saying and what I've said in this debate, and that is the perspective that we've always had, and perhaps not all of those in the gallery, and that the South Coast has had a very strong timber industry in the past. It's part of the heritage of Milton. But this is what happened to the timber industry and what happened to the bushlands behind Milton when the timber industry was really raging in the 1900s and earlier, 1800s. We had a proliferation of red cedar, as the gallery would know. Red cedar that was ripped from the hills behind Milton with bullock teams and sent to Sydney on boats and was used to build sheds and fence posts. Red cedar. That's what happens when you don't take action and heed the message that is given to you. Nobody understood in those days what would be the repercussions for no red cedar anymore, but it is gone from the South Coast. But nevertheless, we've had a vibrant timber industry in the South Coast ever since. We have been, however, making sure that we do not affect our forests as we have done in the past. Again, thank you to everybody who've been participating in the debate, especially those who weren't interjecting, like the member for Lismore and the member for Ballina. But typically the Greens have to interject in the methods they have been, which
Order.
is so unfair and unwarranted.
Order. The question is...
You come on.
Order. The question is that the House take note of the petition. I'll put the question. All of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. The debate on the 20,000 signature electronic petition on native forest logging having concluded, I thank the guests in the gallery who have visited us here today to listen to the debate, and I also want to extend a thanks to those members of the public who have been listening online.